All right, let's get a little sound check, all the good stuff. The casino continues. All right, we got going into the close today. Let's take a. We're gonna look at some possible SPX trades, especially around 252 Central, and then just kind of take a quick look at some of the bigger assets and seeing what they're doing. Bitcoin obviously back in the news, making all-time highs. And well, not today, but recently. And of course, Ethereum consolidating here at super nice levels. I always like to keep an eye on Litecoin, which kind of follows along, of course, with Ethereum. And then you got gold plowing through $4,000 an ounce. Just a phenomenal move, which is fun to see. And then silver, of course, also very close to that. So you got everybody super excited on that front. What's interesting is if you've got gold and silver exploding right now, it's telling us that the U.S. dollar is going to be losing a lot of purchasing power in the years ahead because gold front runs that stuff, which to me means that we'll in a couple of years be seeing an economic crisis where the economy has to be flooded with cash again. We've seen this playbook before. All the fun things and gold, silver, and Bitcoin and all those things are kind of taking the bit in their teeth. Because all that stuff happens before it actually happens. All the stuff happens before it's obvious. Like, oh my God. By the time it becomes obvious to people, like, oh my gosh, the government's going to start printing currency. We should buy some gold. Yeah, it's been rallying. It's up 60%. So that's kind of what's going on there. And then the interesting and fascinating thing to me too is that equities continue to benefit from this as well. S&P continuing to grind it out. NASDAQ continuing to grind it out, and Russell, along the way here too. And it's just an all around hug fest in terms of assets. You got oil as the one that's just kind of hanging out here, but honestly, this is great. Oil hanging around between 60 and $65 a barrel continues to be good for a lower inflation reading. And then you see bonds here, after this little initial up move here with the rate cut, they've just been trading sideways. And I was kind of like to look at that. I keep watching TNX to see if this thing can drop back below and stay below 4%, because I do think that would help the residential real estate market. But so far, it's still hovering there. Yeah, Landman not happy with it, right? Yeah, and the weak dollar is, I mean, the weak, I wouldn't say that's a good question. I mean, is the weaker dollar, are people not going to Europe or England because of the weaker dollar? It's a good question. Maybe there's maybe a handful of people. I just don't know. A lot of people don't even necessarily think about it too much, but it's a good point. Japan, super cheap. There's definitely parts of the world where the US dollar is, you go there and it's like, wow, things here are really cheap. Bali was certainly like that. Um, Japan is another place as well. Getting that bang for your buck. And from there, just kind of heading down, Tesla, shocker, has been kind of volatile here. I've got a put credit spread on this, and it expires this week. And this is one where we sold the $445 put, and we have the $435 put. And it's been pretty volatile. It was profitable, and then it was not profitable, and now it's almost back to being profitable again. I'm fine holding this one. Of course, we know that Tesla tends to be a little volatile. Um, let's see what else here. Amazon benefiting today from the move. Apple creeping up on new all-time highs. I think it's what, a couple points below. Yeah, just consolidating right under. This is huge, massive, massive, massive rounded bottom and all the things there. And I want to see what Meta was doing here today. Now, Meta's been a little odd. This one had a kind of a fall from grace. This is starting to turn, but all it's doing is rallying back up to its 8 EMA. And I'm going through this initially with TradeStations because for me, it's a lot faster than Thinkorswim. Thinkorswim's been pretty slow in terms of bringing up new charts and things like that. Oh yeah, nice. So GEV is probably, oh, so this is a good one too. GEV powers, data centers and stuff like that. You see, you got that rotation in the squeeze, kind of climbed back up, back above that fire line. That one's been so solid. Bullish almanac tomorrow. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, God, nice move. Yeah, nice move. Nice move there. So some good standouts there. Let's see, NVIDIA, not too bad. AVGO. See, CRW. Yeah, I mean, you got the usual suspects here kind of moving. Snow, nice little pop there. PLTR, that's what we got yesterday. Hasn't been able to break above that tree line yet, so all-time high there lines up with the tree line. Just looking to see with the squeeze that's developing, is this something that we can see? Another move in. Kind of a nice rounding action there. Just looking at some of these where we've got some squeezes. Same thing here. You can see the squeeze here, and the momentum is shifted. So you get that kind of nice boomerang effect. And sometimes when you just see that turn in momentum, that can last a while. And so those are kind of interesting because you've got the squeeze in place, and although it's negative, with that turn in momentum, you get the possibility here of kind of like a slingshot effect, which I kind of like. Oh, BKNG, usually that thing's pretty steady. Interesting. So I wonder, it's interesting. We actually decided today, usually for Christmas break, the kids have 3 weeks off for Christmas break. Usually we go to Costa Rica, Cayman, or something like that. And this is the first time, I think, in 10 years, we decided we just didn't want to fly over Christmas break. So we'll probably drive down to South Padre or something like that, but just don't want to deal with it. Tres semanas. Yeah, that's kind of the biggest down move in from 5,600 to 5,123 in 3 days. That's a pretty big down move. All right. I'm just going to show you over here. So what I'm doing is just kind of going through and just, again, as a reminder, if this thing says POS, it does not mean piece of shite, but it just means that the moving averages are stacked positive. If it says mixed, mixed is simply that, yeah, maybe the 8's below the 21. It's not super bad. But if the 21's below the 55, that typically means it's pretty bad. And then if it's negative, it means that every moving average is stacked negative. So you got 4 stages here. Either the moving averages are stacked positive, or they're a little mixed, which can still be positive. But then if the 21 goes below the 55, that's really a negative connotation. And if it says NEG, then it means that all the moving averages are stacked negative. So that's kind of what we're working with here. And like we looked at Futu, and we got a squeeze, and it's mixed, and that makes sense. The 8's kind of pausing and stuff like that. Not the end of the world. But of course, I certainly like if we can see something like Google's interesting here. So Google's been weak the last couple of days, but frankly, kind of deserves a rest. But I like the action here. We've got the first red dot kind of forming here as it's consolidating. Volume is dropping, so everything there that's happening in Google is super bullish. Yeah, 650, no stress there. And yeah, in Oracle, let me see how Oracle's doing today after getting a little bit of a smack down to the 55. Nice recovery today. Nice action in coin. All right, let me see here. So on the indexes themselves that have squeezes, you have IWM. And it's hard to see on this. I gotta redo the dots on this one, but those are black dots. You got a red dot there. And then what's also interesting is that you've got the Dow. So the Dow has a squeeze. And let's see from there. AMD still going. Wow, what a change in valuation. It's interesting is I know a guy. Well, I don't know him personally, but I know his wealth advisor, and it's funny because the you know wealth advisors are always like, oh, you got to diversify, and talks about this client of his that he's had for 20 years who used to work at AMD. Every extra dollar that he had would go into AMD. He didn't want to diversify. And over the years, over 20 years, now it's like $100 million or something like that. And he always laughs because 20 years ago I was telling him to diversify, but he's like, nope. And so now, his AMD shares are up quite a bit over the last couple of days. Yeah, so I did notice that. So I'm not filled in LAC yet, but it's coming down today. And I think this is a good reminder too, because when we looked at it, it was pretty extended away from its 8 EMA. And so, 8 EMA in a momentum stock, we're always going to come back and give it a kiss. And so we've kind of teed up. Maybe we'll get filled by the close, maybe not. But either way, we've got that order working. You know what? And let me, as we're looking here too, and obviously we'll kind of look and see um, how the SPX is going to be doing here into the close. If we look at this, we got the 2-minute and the 5-minute. Remember, the 5-minute kind of does kind of some of those bigger trends. And if we look at what's been happening here on the 2-minute and the Mag 7 for this afternoon, it's been pretty quiet. Yesterday, you could see that, of course, there was a lot of selling pressure happening in stocks. And after I put on my trade, I actually had to run out, and that thing never recovered after the 920 to 940. Typically, if you sell off into it, you're looking for a bounce. In this case, you can see the selling actually accelerated pretty hard and then stayed negative most of the day. And if we look at today on the 2-minute, it's been fairly quiet. You can see some selling kind of coming into there. And then on the 5-minute, and this was yesterday, of course, and a lot of this was tech related. So a lot of the Mag 7, Tesla, etc. Boom, 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 boom. And then it was just kind of quiet into the end of the day. And so now, if we look at, I'm just going to look at Trace real quick. And so you've got, yeah, kind of right where we are right now. So you've got, so typically on something like this, you've got this positive gamma at 6740, big negative gamma 6745. A lot of times in this situation, you end up kind of, you're not able to get through 6745 if that doesn't change. So the idea here as we get closer to the close is we could look at selling, especially if that's in the money, selling some calls. And the idea here, and again, this doesn't work all the time, but you got this little charm pocket here at 6750. Okay, so maybe that'll change. Anyway, it's a little close. It's 215, so we're a little close for doing any SPX trade right now. However, let me see if there's any premium a little bit outside of those levels. So we're at 6750. So 67. Yeah. So, if you want to sell, like, say, the 6755, 6760 call credit spread, because it's got a pretty high probability of expiring worthless, that's great. But, you're going to get like 90 cents and it's a little early. So we'll pass on that. I like to look for something that's got a little bit more asymmetrical risk reward, but maybe it's something we kind of come into here. It could just, rip up to 6760 as well. But anyway, it's a little close. And then, so we'll be watching that. And then also, of course, just kind of watching the action here. And it's quiet, there's not expecting fireworks into the close, but we can watch this as we get closer just to kind of see, like, okay, are we going to like rally into 252 and then sell off, something like that. And you can see right now, and by the way, I'll do some Q&A on this as we get closer to the close and after the close. This is going to be the chart I'm using tomorrow for the live trading. where we'll be looking at these tools real time and these tools real time to kind of gauge this. And you can see right now the hourly chart. Um, the hourly chart is negative. If it start red like this, the momentum just means that it's above zero but falling. And then if it's bright green like this, it's above zero and rising. On the 10-minute, it's below zero and rising. And then on the 5-minute, it's above zero and rising. So this will probably turn bright green here in a minute. And again, just kind of a quick way to look at what the momentum is doing on various time frames. And then actually, you know what I should do is on the and then we can look at the 2-minute chart too on some lower settings. Two. 2, 4, 10, 20, 31 hour. Okay. Okay, there we go. So nice light turning there. So we'll keep an eye on that. We'll bring those back as we get a little bit closer to the close. Yeah, so Area 51. So what's interesting about that is, so here's this, here the 300 billion in Oracle. So this is kind of this weird paper machete thing of how this works. I'm not going to have this diagram down right. So OpenAI announces, um, 300 billion like to Oracle. Now it doesn't mean they're writing a check today, for 300 billion. And there's something like, and in return, Oracle says they're going to buy, $100 billion in NVIDIA chips, right? And then in return, I mean, there's this kind of a circle jerk thing that's happening where there's all these huge deals, but no money is changing hands. So, but the valuations of the companies increase. Anyway, I saw a couple of articles about it. It was pretty interesting. It doesn't mean it's not real, but it just means that it's not like OpenAI stroked a check for 300 billion, right? It's, as you said, it's in the future. But yeah, it is kind of an interesting. It's only kind of a little bit reminds me of the NFTs where somebody would create an NFT and then they would buy it themselves for 10 Ethereum and then list it for 12 Ethereum and then they'd sell it for 12 Ethereum because they'd created their own market on it. It's a little bit like that, but not quite. Yeah. Oh, nice. You found it. Okay. That's great. So yeah, there's the OpenAI, goes to Oracle. Oracle spends the money on NVIDIA chips. Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of a little bit of a circle jerk. But yeah, it's interesting, right? Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. All right, so let's go through here. Again, just kind of see if there's anything else setting up. Not a lot of great sector things setting up here. I mean, energy has a squeeze, but not a huge fan of the back and forth in it right now. XLY has got a squeeze, and we're kind of down below the 21 EMA. And IYT has a squeeze and actually looks okay. That might be worth looking at Uber. Uber is about the only transportation stock. Yeah, and look at Uber's got a squeeze and it looks actually pretty good. We took a stab at this before, and it was a good trade for a couple of bucks. Yeah, as long as the punch bowl is still there, right? without no reason to fight it. Yeah, I kind of like this trade on Uber. It's kind of a little bit more conservative. I think the better entry, of course, is going to be down at the 21 EMA. So keep an eye on that one. Keep that in our back pocket. Alibaba. I noticed here, and let me double check this if I'm doing this right. So if I come over to Equity Hub or so Alibaba is on this. So if you familiar with this, if it's further this way, the more bullish it is. And then if it's above this line, the options are historically expensive. So Alibaba is slightly bullish with inexpensive options after this move, which to me is kind of fascinating. Usually after something like that, you see the premiums explode. Let me come down. I want to come down to the IBD 50. This is as of last week, I think. Yeah, it's not. But this one has been so fascinating. IREN, CLS. Oh, geez, nice. Good looking pop there. A Lab's kind of interesting. PLTR, of course, we got that one. A lot of pops back in the IBD 50 today. New highs on INOD. Rambus, this is one I used to trade back in, late 90s, so it's interesting. I can't believe it hasn't been bought. Nice bounce off the 21. Hims and hers still the online drug dealing is doing well. Yeah, for sure, right? Yeah, CRWV, Danielle looks pretty good. Hood, $10 stock a couple years ago. Just look at this. It's interesting in the IBD 50 because they do focus on stocks that are really growing, and you can just see this. It's just a drift. As the business grows, the shares become more valuable. And when you get something like this, it kind of reminds me of AutoZone, where the business is just getting more valuable, and then the shares just get more valuable, and there's not a lot of trading. Um, it's just a lot of drifting, which is the sign of a very, very sound business. Obviously, not a volatile business like a Tesla or something like that. Rocket Lab is still doing its thing. Let's see, we got to squeeze Rhythm. Rhythm. Yeah, I still like PLTR. That's fine. Let's see, CVNA. Not a huge fan of this action. It's kind of like, we've seen it come down and bounce off the 55. So it can come down here and stay a day or two, but if it doesn't perk back up pretty quickly, then we need to cut it loose. Because when you see something like that and it comes down to that area and it doesn't attract buyers, it's certainly a red flag. I love this pattern. We've had this run up, kind of a rounded bottom on quieter volume. APP, of course, has been very volatile. SEC investigations tend to do that. I had been watching this one. This is Life 360, so we all use it as a family, and it's pretty fascinating. I don't know how they monetize it. I mean, I guess we pay for it, but this is one too where the same thing. Any pullbacks to the 21 EMA, worth a look. That's a good apt description there, Jonathan. Well, I think the thing about this is that the thing about stocks, and this is where it's options versus stocks, is that stock doesn't have to go up every day, and it can, if it's trending higher, it can certainly have times where it drifts. And it's interesting because you could say, like, say you like the stock and say you bought it here, and then you had options that expired in 30 days. You didn't make any money. You might think, God, this thing never moves, and it's at $99. But if you had the stock and just weren't watching it, now you're looking at it, it's at $125. Like, okay. So it is interesting like that, and of course with options, we are really trying to pin down those kind of more focused moves. But there's just something also to be said. What's the saying? It's not about timing the market, it's about time in the market. And there are some times where it's just like, yeah, let's just structure this in a way so we have exposure. Let me see. AVDL, smaller stock coming down to the 55. Riot. Oh yeah. Is this must be the gaming platform, because I definitely see credit card charges on my credit card for Roblox and then Riot. So Riot must be the other popular gaming platform. TVTX, this is one I like. We bought this one. It's got a squeeze. IBD 50 stock. See if this can take out that 2887 and keep on going. This is not an. This is again. There's the question of, okay, is this like smoking the bong? It's gonna get going again. This just isn't attractive. Typically, if it's a good stock and you're down here at the 55 EMA, it's getting bought. And the fact here that it's not getting bought, and in fact, the 55 is acting as resistance along with the fire line, it says a lot. I don't know if it's even still on my BD 50 list. AM, ANET, yeah, geez. Good looking bar there. Riot is Bitcoin mining. That makes way more sense. Okay, that's right. And yeah, that's right. Yeah, VRT is nice. And so the challenges we're looking at some of these is just, are there some here that are actually in a buy zone? There's a lot that are extended. ONC, great. And Google's in a buy zone right now. So actually, I like Google here. Just kind of hanging out. And it's almost 2:30, so we'll get back and look at the SPX again. A long play for CRM. So if you're talking like a short-term play where you're looking for kind of a spike, there's nothing about this I like. And in fact, I'm looking at this going, this stock looks like it wants to die. So it doesn't mean it'll die, but it's just not a repeatable pattern that I would play expecting upside movement. Let's see, TM. Nice action there. Good volume on that too. McDonald's to me is like an oscillator. It doesn't, the stock, it just oscillates. You get down to 280, you buy it, gets up to 310, 320, you sell it. It just done that for a long time. In kind of kind of a weird uptrending. It's a weird pattern. People keep buying the burgers. All right, CR, CL. We exited that one yesterday. That wasn't a bad trade. It wasn't a great trade, but it wasn't a bad trade. But it's just CRWV looks really good. I like, you do have a squeeze in place. Again, would love to buy it closer to the 21 EMA, but when these things get going, it could get going. I'm gonna keep an eye on this. Yeah, I like Danielle's idea on this. Doing the exchange traded fund. Yeah, that one might be interesting for continuation into tomorrow, because you did get the, it's like that band, 3 doors down, kind of like 3 days down. You get the bounce. Let's see, ARM. Nice move there, right into the fire line. KOPN. Gosh, if I can type KOPN. Nice, nice. These that I'm looking at, I mean, again, Uber here is a little bit more on the boring side. I'd like to set up an order to buy a pullback on this one, just because you can see it's been testing the 21 like every day. So that to me is kind of for lack of a better word, kind of an easy one to do. So, so the 21 EMA is like 90, let's call it 97.50, get a little bit above it. And so if we go out to next week, and let's do Theo Price clear, and let's just say we want the price to drop about $2 for a fill sometime this week. And if we want to buy the $95 calls, right now they're $5.40. Well, great, we can put in an order to buy them at $3.50, and I would actually up that to $3.75. And on top of that, I'm going to come over here and just say, well, what are the November ones if we want a little bit more time? So if this one isn't too crazy, yeah, so 729 instead of 350. That's probably not, not the end of the world or anything like that. But since there's a squeeze and we're looking for it to happen now, I don't mind doing this one. So I'm going to do this, and I'm just going to say for the $95 options, I'm going to put in an order to buy them at $3.75, and they're currently $5.40. So if that makes sense. So not buying it right here. And that's just kind of, especially if we get kind of a little bit of a flush, we're there with essentially our fishing hooks already in the water. Good till cancel. And yeah, let me just double check here. All looks good. All right, and to clarify, I'm not buying them right now. I am placing a limit order and where I don't expect to get filled today. And we are 15, 16 cents away from getting filled on LAC. I'll just continue to work that order. I'm not concerned about trying to grab it right now. Uber, a nice squeeze. Placing a limit GTC order to buy a pullback to just above the 21 EMA. All right, so that's Uber, and then let's take a look at Tesla here. Yeah, nice bounce today. I mean, really solid action. I like our put credit spreads. A good thing about the put credit spread is that, sometimes if you buy a call, Tesla then has to exceed the price that you got it at just to break even. Whereas with the put credit spread, it merely has to get back to the price. So there's an advantage in that. Let's see. Let's come over here again and just kind of look at the. I don't want that. I don't need my windows arranged. Microsoft. I asked Grok how to disable that, and it said, good luck. If you guys have ever, if you're having some issue you're trying to get through, and whether it's, emotional or some situation you're in, download the Grok app, and use voice mode, and then use the unhinged version, and just lay out your problem to it. And then when you're done, say, okay, now roast me. And you actually get some great insights. And it's hilarious as well. Just a little tip there. If you've never used Grok Unhinged in voice mode, it's, as long as you're okay with very graphic language, it's pretty hilarious. But yeah, just lay out a problem that you're having to Grok Unhinged in voice mode on your phone, and then when you're done, just say, okay, now please roast me, and because this is something that's bothering me. And it's great because it actually will give you it's hilarious, and it kind of gives you insights that maybe you're, are you looking at it like you're a victim, or whatever. It's funny. Or we did it with like, oh, I feel bad, this person's asking for this, and we don't know what to say, and then okay, now roast both me and the person, and you actually get really good insights, and then you're also laughing a lot. Yeah, Annie. Whew. She can rip you a new one. Okay, so let's take a look here at. Yeah, I had a good friend of mine. He was having some issues, and we were in a car together, and I had him do that. Oh my god, it was so funny. The things you use AI for. Okay, so if we come back and then we look at kind of where we are. So we got our kind of biggest negative gamma strike at 6750. Oftentimes that means, we're likely not going to be able to close above that level. And right now we're at 6752. And then keep in mind, as we get closer to the close, the idea is that we could sell a call credit spread and possibly fall back into this little pocket here, which is 6750, which would be good. There's also a chance we could go to 6760, but again, typically, not always, but typically you're going to stay kind of below that bigger gamma strike, either right at it or below it. That's funny, Vincent. Yeah, you can look at 0DTE or all. You can choose. So we'll kind of look at that into the close, and then we'll zoom in on this a little bit. Again, not a lot of action here. I mean, it's kind of quiet as we get into the close. In a perfect world, we'd kind of get a little bit of a rally into 252, and then sell an in the money call credit spread, sell like the 6750, 6755. So that's kind of the plan right now. Let's see where we are. Yeah, so walk up day. So if we look at the NDX, so another way to do this, and we haven't looked at this too much, we're going to talk more about this tomorrow in the live class, is that so over here you can see we got the regular tick indicator, right? And NDX day has just been a little bit stronger. And so you are going to get some indication in the Mag 7. I found that in the Mag 7, though, it's typically you get more concentrated buying or selling in the first hour and a half. But we've also got, and you get this too on the NDX specifically. So this is going to be too many probably on one chart. But we can also see kind of what's going on the NDX if you're specifically looking. I mean, you could take off, you could remove the NYSE one, and then you'll see that sometimes there's a little bit more, it's more NDX specific. So if you look at, this morning on the NDX versus the SPX, well, the NDX, you know, on the NDX itself, you were just having buys all morning long. And so, yeah, you weren't necessarily, you got some on, so again, this is NYSE, you got some there, but the rally today was definitely more tech specific. And it was not necessarily Mag 7 specific. So it was a broader kind of a tech rally. So it's useful for that because it's like, okay, that's actually really showing us what's going on in tech land. So we'll kind of keep an eye on this into the close as well. Um, January 20. Yeah, Lewis, I actually really like that idea. And I think, yes, I think that's a great idea. Nice, Todd. Great post. So let's do this. We'll keep an eye on the NDX here as we get into kind of 252, and we'll keep an eye, on the SPX here, and just kind of get a sense. And again, just kind of a quietly positive close. Bitcoin, S&Ps, NASDAQ, Indahood, CRWV, all these look really solid. And it'll be fun. And then tomorrow during the live trade. So tomorrow during the live trading, we're gonna be. I got a question earlier, like, are we only gonna do like SPX trading? The answer is no. We'll be focused on SPX, but remember, we utilize this stuff also. It's like, hey, if NDX is strong, let's trade some of the stronger NDX stocks. So there's kind of a focus on watching SPX and NDX, but certainly the idea coming in like, great, what's really driving what's happening today? Also, an interesting thing here in the VIX, and you can see now, anytime we kind of get to 17 on the VIX, it gets rejected, meaning that stocks rally again. Typically, that number is 20, but the volatility is compressed so much that now it's been 17, give or take. And of course, the put call ratio continues to stretch. All right, so let's see if we do. Now, ideally here, we would get a little bit of a rally into, about 252, and then we could sell the 67.50, 67.55 call credit spread. So that's kind of the tentative plan right here. It may change if there's a bigger move than that. So what I do in a situation like that is just kind of tee it up and get it ready to go. So the 67.50, 67.55. So right now it's 220. Nice kind of almost 1-to-1 risk to reward ratio. Now, what'll be different here is if we sell off into 252, then I would not do that, and I would instead sell a put credit spread. So if we rally into 252, and especially if we rally above, if we rally to 67.55, we could even sell to 67.55, 67.60. And see when there's just these up here, it's very rare that you're going to go up in there. So the nice thing about this, it kind of keeps your enthusiasm in check. Like we ain't going up there, just as we ain't going down here. So that's kind of the playground that we're in. Yeah, Jonathan, I need to update. I need to go through and update the next cycle dates. The last cycle zone we had was like the 19th through the 22nd of September, and we actually had a nice 3-day pullback, and then we took off again. So I think the next ones are coming up pretty soon. I need to double check, and I will post those as soon as I get them. And it's interesting right now, and I've noticed there are more and more people getting a little nervous, like, how did this market can't keep going up? And it's interesting with that too, because then that's almost kind of a recipe, right? That it keeps going up. But we always want to be clear too, and I have a hard time with this too. It's kind of like, okay, is it too high? Is it too extended? But it's just like, okay, what's the next setup? Yeah, climbing the walk of worry. It's basically walking down a dark alley, and anyone with a knife is either preoccupied or sleeping. Yeah, Lauren, that's one of the best quotes in trading. What's interesting is John Maynard Keynes was a currency speculator, and he lost his ass speculating. And it was kind of funny. And I think he may have been the one that came up with that quote. Ba-dum-bum. So again, just remember we got the NDX over here and then SPX over here, and kind of the big strike, and it can change. It can change in the last 10 minutes, but right now it's 67.50. And so when you see that, typically you're going to close at or below 67.50. In a perfect world, and we could do it now. In a perfect world, if we could actually rally up to 67.55 or 56, I would actually sell the 65.55, 65.60. So that's what we're kind of doing right now. A little bit of hurry up and wait. Yeah, and it should make the live trading for tomorrow's class kind of fun. And the good thing is whether, we have a big up day or a big down day tomorrow, or we're trading sideways, we'll be able to utilize these kind of tick tools to kind of place trades, based on that, getting a read of the market. Okay, we still have time. And then we could also look here at the NDX. We don't do a lot of NDX trading simply because it is kind of a hugely massive contract. And I guess I really don't need to look at 100 strikes. Let's go down to 40. And so, 25, 100, right? Seems like a good round number. And if we look at this, and if we look at volume and open interest, the volume on these is, it's funny. I actually talked to the last money show I was at. I spoke right after, or I was on a panel with a guy from the NASDAQ. And he's like, well, have you looked at total volume in NDX recently? It's starting to pick up. And I said, no. And this isn't bad. I mean, it's not, not SPX. But when you get the volume like that, you start to get little, the spreads still suck. However, on something like this, the idea of selling the 25 100, 25 110 call credit spread is reasonable. But you could also sell, $10. If you could also sell $10 wide on the SPX, it probably makes more sense. I kind of like that trade actually. So let's, I'm going to keep that one teed up here as well. Yeah, no, Bill, I think that's when it's been really interesting with this, because the Mag 7 has been kind of a nice add-on there. And then I think what's really interesting, that you know you can drill down enough where you can actually say, especially if you're focused on tech, the broader tech this morning was pretty fascinating. So this is NDX, and you're just like boom, 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 and then once that goes away, what do? We just trade dead sideways. And iron condors in the NDX are interesting. Now the challenge here with, say, doing this on the NDX is that at least on the SPX you actually do have, you know, you have some impact here. You just can't really see that on the NDX. There's just not enough volume. So NDX, of course, typically can follow SPX, but it can be different too. So, all right, so we're getting a little bit of a pop here. We're at 67.53. I'm going to switch back here now to SPX, and I would like to do 67.55. There's just nothing there. So 67.50 is the way to go, but maybe. So you're getting a little bit of a pop in the ticks here. Empuje, what time is it? 2:50. It'd be super intriguing here if we got up to like 67.56. GRL, good question. It's kind of an if-then trade. Like, you don't know. So from 330 to 352, you don't know if it's going to rally or fall. So if it rallies, you fade it, you short it, and if it falls, you buy it. 1 billion to buy. Okay, 1 billion to buy. Nice. Okay, so we're getting a little bit of a pop here. So I'm going to look at doing the 55s then, because that would be this one, the top little one there. But we just got to see. Oh God, there's no money in it. They're 85 cents, which basically means that the market is already saying it's not going to happen. Okay, 50, 55. So I'm teeing up the 50, 50, 55s. And then let's see if we can get it. All right, so pretty good risk reward. And now we're just kind of see as we get into 252, can we, and maybe we go sideways, right? And it could keep climbing. But we're just kind of seeing now, okay, once we get past 252, could we start drifting back to that large strike, assuming it's still, as it updates, it doesn't change. Yeah, it's pretty strong. And it's interesting looking at that for the NDX as well. Curious. NDX a little trickier because you don't necessarily have as much of a target, but 25, 100 is a kind of a round number there. $25, 110, 120. So the 25, 110, 120 is like $6. So if you want to try NDX as well. And then we'll see if we get a little bit of easing back. And now you can see on the NYSE, ticks have gone negative. Mag 7, kind of hanging out there. You had a nice little pop there in the NDX. And we'll just kind of see, it's just like the last 4 or 5 minutes is just kind of, it's like doing a plank, right? See how some of these stocks and Tesla and all these guys are doing into the close here. Hood, CRCL, nice general flows. Yeah, you're seeing some tech action there. PayPal, Roblox. Yeah, NDX is always the dicier one. It's just SPX tends to be more reliable. UDOW. Let's see what are the ticks doing here. Google, pretty strong day in the NASDAQ, but Google, catching its breath. Well deservedly, though, of course. SMCI, first time I've seen it kind of get going in a while. NOW. ARM, $7 move on that one's a really good move. I kind of miss the days when MSTR was, because remember it split 10 for 1. It was just a monster stock. CDAR WD, a closing above the tree line, very nice. For 18 cents. Oh my God. Oh yeah, back then, yeah, when it was just a pre-Bitcoin stock, right? Even Doge wants in on the action. All right, almost time for the 2-minute plank. All right, so the structure did change a little bit. It updates in the last 10 minutes. So now you've got the biggest strike, 655. And then again, typically means we would be at 67.55 or below. So essentially, I would have preferred to do the 67.55, 67.60. So that did update. So that can get a little tricky there. We'll see what this ends up doing. About 1:45 seconds. Yeah, the risk reward is great. And then, the question is will it walk down back to 67.50 by the close? Or is it going to pin right at that 67.55 level? Just to keep things interesting. Man, Danielle, there are so many new ETFs right now. I actually need to get an updated list of all of them because they're just coming out every day. There's so many. So many. All right, we're getting into the last 1 minute, and we're going to see where the market makers want things to close. TEMT. I heard that recently, and it's just insane. So I do need to get like a list of the most. I almost need to list out all the stocks I like to trade with their ETFs, like just like you mentioned with TEM and your Tesla, Nvidia, all that kind of stuff, just to kind of keep track of both of them. Yeah, and that is a plus. All right, 5 seconds. Where do they want it to close? It's gonna be interesting because there's a big magnet at 55 and a small magnet at 50. And it looks like 53.76. And remember, these do cash settle. So although we didn't get 50, so yeah, what did we sell it for? So 370. So basically, it's going to close at 376. So it's kind of a scratch. So it's interesting. We got the fall, and of course, this would work nicer by doing the 67.55, 67.60. But interesting how you did get that little rejection from that level. Nasdaq kind of just kept it going. Sold it for 4. There you go. That works. Yeah, so that was good. So and then again, just a reminder. So tomorrow we're going to spend the morning doing live trading for this class coming up specifically with these tools. And so I'm going to stick around for a little bit. I have to go pick up my youngest at school in a little bit here, but I just want to stick around, answer any questions, things like that. I think some of the things that are The other one I can add on here too, because we've got there's essentially four studies. And the main one I've been using, of course, is there's one for the SP 500. So you don't want to get like too overkill. But if we look at, what this looks like, a 2 for 2, very nice. Um, you can see that and we do need to make some tweaks on this, but for the SP 500, it's been a little goofier. In fact, I really much prefer this, but this is something too, as you guys play around with it, we may make some tweaks and things like that too. But it's just a little goofier, kind of a reading. And so, but actually have found that the NDX, especially on the 2-minute, is pretty solid. And so on a day like this, where you're getting something like this, you are going to see walk up, in this case, from 24,850 to right about 25,050 before this fell off. And then at that point, we just traded sideways. And and what I like about the Mag 7 one is that's when you can see like, wow, there's a lot of gas here. And it's okay when it goes quiet. It just means that when it's like this, it just means that, and remember, when the tick is like this, it means that every purchase is above the previous purchase. And that just shows incredible buying power. If it's the same, it goes back down. It could be staying steady. So every purchase is above the prior purchase. And so when all the Mag 7 stocks are like that, it just shows that it's a huge amount of money going in there and doing that. And then, oh, thanks, Lorna. So Lorna posted the link to this, for the class. And so what is this class that I'm doing? And this class is essentially, there's 3 packages, and the basic package, and this will be different based on if you're a member or not already. But on the basic package, you get the workshop that I'm going to be doing live tomorrow. And then you get all 4 of the tick oscillator indicators. And then because we actually really like this along with the sandbox strategy, which I'll also be talking about tomorrow, you also get a more detailed recording on that. If you already have that one, like something else, that's fine too. And then the pro version essentially includes all of this, plus you get the trend rotation labels. And the trend rotation labels are these that are sitting on the top. And it's just an easy way to kind of see what's going on in multiple time frames. And then it also includes 2 days, additional days of live trading, which will be later in October. And then the Elite, of course, is fun. It gets all that, but also you get a ticket to our live event. So that'll be cool. And, if you guys know, Tom is retiring from Tasty Trade, but he did agree to speak at our event, which I think is cool. Tom's been a friend and mentor for 15 years. So it's always fun. And I kind of want to see what he's up to next and stuff like that too. So if you've never seen him speak before, he's a wide-ranging mind on a lot of different topics, and it's a lot of fun. So that'll all be fun. So that's what's going on there. And again, the tools that we're talking about here, the main ones are going to be, we got the NYSE tick indicator, and then the Mag 7, and then also NDX. We're still tweaking out some of the stuff on the SPX one, and as those tweaks come out, you'll get those upgrades for free. And then, just kind of seeing how this works as you go back and you can look at, well, the nice thing about the ticks, you can go back and just kind of look and see, would they have helped you on different trading days. And so here on this day, the market gapped up. This is the NDX. And you can see we're trading. This is like a big tell here. We're trading sideways, but you're starting to see the Christmas tree light up. Okay. And there's 2 levels of lights. The yellow ones here in this case is level 1. And then if you see extended both of them, that's when you get walk down days. But level 1 just means it's when you're consolidating and you start seeing this level 1 lights, it just means that there's a lot of selling beneath the surface. And typically that's going to result in a breakdown. And indeed, we started to break down here. And then you saw massive selling in the Mag 7. And so again, it kind of gives you a guideline of what's really going on there. And then, of course, if you look down here at the NDX, it's even more appropriate for the NDX. You can see like the massive selling that was happening here, the massive selling that was happening here. And so that just kind of kept you, in. And then when it kind of resolves itself and goes back to neutral, typically then you're just looking at a little bit more sideways. So, again, you don't need to have all these. So if I'm looking at the NDX, probably, the ones I want to look at are the NDX ticks and then the Mag 7. And then on the SPX, of course, I want to look at I actually prefer the NYSE ticks for the SPX just because that's what I've watched all my life. We've also got them specifically for the SPX. And so we can just kind of go back and look. And what's great about it, you can just kind of go back and look. And now the other thing is like, if, okay, let's say we gap up and you're worried that it's going to fall, right? And it's like, it's going to fall. So let's look at the NDX here. Is the NDX going to crater here? Well, there's no selling. And in fact, the dots here are they're above zero. So that's a positive. So even though it's kind of drifting back here, you can see it's actually positive action here. And then there's no real selling until later in the day. And later in the day, if you get a little bit of a blip, it's like, okay, we're just going to pause here. That's fine. But you can see there's no selling, no buying. And so when you see something like this, what's nice about this is that you're just like, okay, well, this thing is at least it's not going to puke. Doesn't mean, maybe it's not going to go up very much more. And this is kind of the thing where you open up and you start to see this, especially after like 10:30. Iron flies in the NDX can be pretty powerful because they're pretty fat credits. And so I think that's something that's super, super interesting there too. And then, I always like to go back on days too, where you just thought like, man, the market really fooled me that day or something like that. And just kind of get a sense of, would this have helped? And, here's an example a couple days ago where, we kind of opened up, um, where was it? This was an interesting day because there were so many things going on. So it gapped up, okay. And then you got, again, NDX, you got NYSE and all that kind of stuff. So you do get selling like right away. So selling, selling, selling. It's like, okay, gosh, we filled the gap pretty quick. Now, is this thing going to puke? What's going to happen here? And then after you get about, and typically after you get about 10:30, it's kind of like, the gas kind of comes out of the market. We're going sideways, we're going sideways, we're going sideways. But look what happens, as you get closer to the close. It's like, man, you got steady buying in the NYSE, steady buying in tech. And although it's not a huge, I wouldn't call it this huge rally. We go from 24,850 to what 24,900 and change. That's not bad, and that's a nice drift up into the close. You can sell put credit spreads, and it also makes you feel more confident as you're holding on to your stocks. Similar pattern here, where we kind of gap down a little bit. Oh my gosh, there's some selling. We get through kind of that, and then it's just like, what? You go into the afternoon, are we going to puke? Or are we going to rally? And you can see light buying, light buying, light buying. Great, great, great. And again, it gives you the confidence to kind of hold on. And then here's the opposite, right? The opposite is also true when, because that's always the weird thing. It's like everything looks good, and then you go to the gym, and then it's a shit show. And as you're watching this, like, okay, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? And you see this, and again, most of this is one level, but you're seeing sometimes two levels here. And when you see that, that's typically you're going to see a pretty decent sell off in that case. And that was like 120 points. And it's been a while since we've had a full on walk down day, but what real selling looks like when you feel like, oh my God, this thing is selling pretty hard. You can see we're coming along here. We're at 24,450. Okay, NYC, you're showing some selling. And then when you start to, you can see the impact when these both light up like this. Man, the NASDAQ goes from 24,400, drops 200 points. And if you're buying puts and stuff like that, you can just feel comfortable staying short. And you stay short until like the yellow lights go away. And once the yellow lights go away, and you can, of course, sell into strength too. Typically, then this massive selling is done because the selling comes in pockets, it comes in waves. And that's what we look at there too. Yeah, and so you can do it for an individual ticker. And so if I put on, say Tesla, and this is one I'm still playing around with. Lorna may actually have better answers for questions on this one. But what you can do, the Mag 7 one, Lorna, if I mess any of this up, please feel free to yell at me. But if you go over to the Mag 7 one, what Lorna has done is you come over here and just say, okay, I need to modify this. And if I come over here and say custom ticker Tesla, hit tab, now what's going to happen is that it will ignore the rest of these. Okay, you don't have to delete them. You can if you want to, and it's just going to focus on this. And so if I hit OK, and then I got to put this as Tesla, right? and then you can double check and just say like, okay, yeah, there it says Tesla, and then basically, nice, cool, okay. So then you can have something just on Tesla. And now, and that's useful, obviously, if you're just, if you are just trading Tesla, and you can kind of go along and see what the action is. And so, especially at the open, and what I like to see, if Tesla gaps down, and you can see here that even though it's still down, you can see immediate buying coming into Tesla. And when you see something like that, it's like, okay, well, let's do a good day trade here. And those, 15, 20-minute day trades in Tesla at the open, like that can be a lot of fun. Of course, Tesla is going to move with the market, but what's nice about that is that if you're going to see, a lot of specific things happening in a particular stock that you're trading, um, right here, Tesla gaps up, and it turns back into buying, and so you can kind of get a sense of what's going on there. I'd say it's not as smooth as like the NYSE or something like that, but it gives you an idea, especially when the stock's going to turn around. So here's Tesla, selling, 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 and especially when you get something like this, that's a big reversal. That just kind of means that essentially the selling's done, and then from there you can see we actually just rally into the close. So I found that to be pretty interesting and pretty useful. um, gap up here and then just sell off. So we gap up strong, but once you see again this huge selling here, it's kind of over. And then it's so again super helpful, right? Same thing here. You gap up in Tesla, man, you're seeing immediate selling, and you're just kind of blah 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 blah. Um, so anyway, so stuff you can play around with there. It's kind of cool. Um, oh, click use custom button. Thank you. Yeah, so I may have. Mhm. Got the globals. So anyway, I'm obviously still playing around with this, but I think there's some really interesting, cool things there. Yeah, you know what, Lorna? Maybe, yeah, maybe. Well, you did it in showcase, and maybe tomorrow for a few minutes. Yeah, if you want to show that, or even if you want to hop on here real quick. But perfect, perfect. Yeah, and then oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah, obviously I was just flying through there pretty quick. Let's see.
Yeah, go down below where it says Tesla,
Custom.
JC.
Use custom. Yes.
Yes.
Tesla like that.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. That's new. Yeah, when we first were doing this, we kind of updated it so it made sense. Yes. Okay. That makes more sense. Whew. That was a confidently incorrect moment. Yeah, so now you can see, of course, now it makes more sense, right? Because it's actually instead of Mag 7, it's actually Tesla. And so I've noticed a lot of that too for these stocks, certainly at the open. And okay, excellent. Well, anyway, we'll be playing around with that more tomorrow. And then, yeah, for the labels that are up here, what's nice about this now, these only show what's happening right now. So as we're scrolling back, these are not going to change. But what's nice about this, and we'll talk about this more tomorrow, is that if you're looking at this, think of this as the 0 line, and if the hourly momentum is dark green, what it means that it's below 0, but it's rising. And then in this case, the 30-minute momentum is bright green. It means it's above 0 and rising. Okay, 20 minutes bright green, it's above 0 and rising. 10-minute is bright green, it's above 0 and rising. And then, the 2-minute and 4-minute in this case are dark red, which is above 0 and falling. Okay, and if they were bright red, it means that they would be below 0 and falling. So what's nice about this too, and again, this will be good during the live trading because we're not able to, as we see, as we scroll back, it's not going to change. It's only going to show what's happening right now. But what I found about the labels that's really great is that, and of course, the labels will be based on whatever ticker you're looking at. So right now, this is Tesla. So the labels will say, okay, great, we're going to focus on Tesla. We don't care what else is happening. And then what's typically what I notice is that when something really rolls over, in addition to watching the ticks, you'll start to see all of these time frames start to go red. So if they're dark red, it means they're above 0, but instead of going up, now they're going down. And sometimes, a lot of times, you'll see consolidation like this, and then like all of these turn red, and that precipitates a sell-off. Because if you think about it, if the momentum is green, it means, the momentum is rising, right? But if it starts to consolidate, the momentum then starts to roll, and that precipitates price actually dying. Yeah, no, that sounds good, Lorna. That would be amazing. Thank you. Yeah, and I can, and Lorna, what time, and by the way, if you want to hop on the mic and say anything, feel free. What time would you like to begin tomorrow? It is tomorrow, right? Okay, perfect. So we'll start. So we'll start at 8 a.m. Central tomorrow, and Lorna will do a quick overview on some of the tools there. And then our plan will be is that when the market opens, we'll start using the tools to do some live trading, and then we'll pause and do a little bit of kind of you know, time out and just kind of go over some strategies, kind of like, okay, in this kind of scenario, we're going to use a credit spread, and here's our stop, and here's our target, and stuff like that. And then we'll likely take a break from about 11:30 to 1, give or take. We'll see. We'll kind of play it by ear, and then we'll go into the close and do some more trading. And the reason I say that is depending on the morning, we may, if the market's really volatile, we'll focus on trading and do some of the um, other stuff a little bit later. And if the market's slow, we'll do it a little bit earlier, but there'll definitely be stuff to do, which is great. Oh, nice, Robbie. Okay, that's cool. Very nice. And then, yeah, and and you'll notice here that this is the 2-minute. I have found on the indexes, if you're going to, look for a potential, and again, the SPX here, I found most of the time it's not super helpful, at least not yet. We may have to play around with some of the parameters, but it's okay because I actually use the NYSE anyway. So I'm just going to come over here and drop that. And then this is kind of what I like to use. So I will be using my main screen is going to be for looking at the SPX and things like that, is looking like this, where we're going to have, these are the daily quant pivots. If you don't have them, that's fine. And then, of course, momentum bars, MOMO, and momentum reversals. And you'll find that these all work together pretty well. And so, the SPX yesterday morning kind of gapped up. We had a MOMO reversal. And then you can see the selling and the Mag 7 and all that kind of fun stuff. And then today we gapped up a little bit. We did have some MOMO, we did have some Mag 7 buying, and you'll notice that things petered out at, lo and behold, that second quant pivot level. And remember, most of the time, like 70% of the time, we are going to be between daily Q1 and daily quant pivot H1, which is high, and then L1, which is low. And then there are times when it can get to H2 and then L2. And today we got into this zone here. And the days where you kind of have this like more walk up, walk down, that's when you actually blow through those levels, which is rare. It only happens like 5% of the time. And if you look at the close here, as we get at this Q2 level, like, is this going to get rejected at H2? And you can see, man, look at this, just huge, huge, huge action that comes into this. And let me see, there's another one. I'm trying to think. Does this one go back 5 minutes? No, I have what? So on the 5 minute, you can go back up to 180 days, and so we'll review some of these more tomorrow. But especially, you can go back and look at the ones that all the volatility that was happening earlier this year. But even like right here, it's again, most of the time we're going to be between these two levels, right? And so the only way really that we're going to be able to get down to the next level is extreme selling. And so it's useful to see like, okay, because when it's here in a normal market, you're like, okay, is it going to bounce from here? What's going on? And you see this and it's like, man, this thing, it's going right there. And in this case, once we got there, you can see that the selling essentially lightened up and we just traded sideways from there. So I think it's a really helpful kind of a thing to see what happens when we get there to those levels. Let me see if there's another. That was a crazy day. I'm not sure if there was any real. Of course, we had a lot more of these back in trade wars, but yeah, here's this gap up. You get the momentum reversal right away, and then just look at this just selling pressure, and it takes you through all of these. That's days like that are pretty fantastic if you can be dialed into it. So anyway, so a lot of stuff we'll be able to look at tomorrow, and I'll set this up so we can go back like 180 days and we can kind of look at some more examples with this, and we can kind of understand the key times of day. I do like the momentum. So if you got the momentum tools, I'm certainly utilizing those in this case. And then we'll also look at a couple of different ways to set it up. Now, I don't have a squeeze on this just because I don't want to cram it, but I am obviously a fan of the squeeze, and 5 minute squeezes are good too. I just look at that on a different chart. Now, when I do like this 5 minute chart and it goes back 180 days, one thing I want to caution you is that so there's 5 minute, 5 minute. Do I need to go back and look at this? Let's see. Yeah, 5 minute, 180 days. Okay. One cautionary tale here is that I don't necessarily want to look at this all the time. Oh, okay. That's why I can't find it because I'm on it. So I've got this on 180 days right now. The only reason I have this on 180 days is that so we all can go back and look at examples. When I'm trading and I'm not doing a class, then I'm going to switch this back to you don't need 180 days. You can do 5 days, 10 days. But the only reason I have it 180 days is because so we can all, tomorrow we can go back and just see it's useful to see what happened during some of these extreme situations. And you can see on something like this, because in stuff like this, you want to identify what rare looks like. And so sometimes, you might see a move like this and think, well, yeah, this isn't real. Well, when you see this, you're just like, not only is it real, but this thing is not going to stop. And I think that's just important to understand because it's always like, oh, it's here. This is resistance. Maybe I'll short it. You never, never. When it's like that, you go with it. So there's those rare times in the market you want to recognize when you want to be able to just go with it. And same thing here to the downside is that, if you open up and it's like, here's a quiet open and then, oh my God, what's happening here? And you can see most of the selling is in the Mag 7. Like the NYC indicator is kind of like, whatever. And the Mag 7 has such an impact on this that we want to know when the Mag 7 is in sell mode. Yeah, so what I'm looking forward to this, and of course we don't know what tomorrow is going to be, right? But what I'm really liking on stuff like this is that you can really tune into the open, and really like in day trading especially, and really a lot of kind of trading, the action's in the first 90 minutes, and I think you could argue that the action's in the first 45 minutes. And sometimes, especially if there's like a gap down, especially if there's a gap down in this kind of a market, but even if there's a gap up, you can kind of position, say like, okay, look at Meta, here's 5 stocks that are gapping down, or maybe here's 5 stocks that are gapping up, the bigger ones that move with the market. And you can kind of be teed up like, okay, if this market's going to roll over, what am I going to do? Is if market's going to, continue to rally, what am I going to do? And you just have a little checklist like that. So you're kind of ready. And most importantly, with these tools, you'll know what to look for. And that's really the half the battle because so much of this stuff, it can happen so fast that it's only obvious in hindsight. And the whole goal of this and the goal of the live trading tomorrow is that we're able to recognize it in real time and take action on it in real time. Yeah, no, Alberto, I think it's stuff like this where, and I always say, and I find sometimes that like tool ideas that I have, it comes from when I'm explaining something to my kids and they're getting frustrated because they're so confused about what I'm saying. And it just tells me it's like, okay, I'm talking to someone who's just starting, but I'm basing it on like 25 years, 30 years of experience. And so I'm just kind of rapid firing all this information and they have no idea what I'm talking about. But if I can quantify it in a way where they don't need me to explain it to them because they're going to see it once they understand how it works, that saves them 15,000 hours of staring at tick charts, right? Or studying momentum and all that kind of stuff. All right. So if you guys are just seeing this for the first time, I'll review this real quick. If you see, Lorna has posted right here this link, simplertrading.com/ultimate. And that will take you to, if you click that, it will take you to a sales page. And on the sales page, you can get, there's a basic, there's a pro, there's an elite. And the basic, you get the strategy workshop, which is tomorrow. But most importantly, you get all 4 of those tick oscillator tools. And then on the pro version, you're going to get that. Plus, you're going to get those trend rotation labels, which you'll see, I think, are pretty important as well. The elite version includes all of that. And this also has 2 additional days of live trading, by the way. It's the best way to learn how to do it is to do it. And then the elite is also has a ticket to our live event on November 7th, which is coming up in almost exactly 4 weeks ish. And we'll do a full day of live trading. Tom Sosnoff will be there as a guest speaker. Again, he's retiring, from Tasty Trade. This may be one of his last appearances for a while. So that would be, really good guy if you've never talked to him. And we'll be doing a poker night tournament that night, which is a lot of fun. Plus, you get to hang out with other traders, which is always cool. All right. Any additional questions? Otherwise, I will pack up and go pick up my youngest child from high school so that my wife does not beat me for forgetting. How are the dates set for live trading? Yes, it's possible they could change, but yes. And they are, let me see if they're on this page. Who is John Carter? I've tried the other tools. Guest speaker, poker tournament, 2 days live trading. So the dates are on here somewhere, I think. But if they're not, if someone could add them, that would be amazing. All right, excellent. Oh, thank you. Yep, thanks, Bill. Okay, all right, guys. Thank you so much. Looking forward to the class tomorrow. I will see you guys there. Any questions? Let us know. We're going to start tomorrow at 8 a.m. Lorna will graciously come on and explain some of the install stuff and make sure that I do custom correctly, which is super helpful. And then we'll do some live trading. We'll talk about some trading plans around it, do some more live trading, and we'll call it a day. And it should be a lot of fun. Okay, all right. You guys have a fantastic rest of the evening.